So, the job interview, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Like I said, this is one of my most favorite subjects. First off, what I always say is that if you've got the job interview, congratulations. That means that you have already turned in a powerful resume. The company is interested in you enough to where they want you to somehow come in or through Zoom or through the web, have a conversation with them about how you're going to be a good fit for the job. So I always say that you can stop. You can see this guy, he's got his arms raised in the air. You can do the happy dance for a little bit, but here's the truth. Now the work begins, okay? So I want you, today we're going to learn really how do you prepare for the interview. I'm going to teach you about the different various types of interviews. People kind of get stuck there where they think the interview is going to be a certain way, and then when they go to it, it might be a little different or have a variation to it. I don't want anything to shock you. Instead, I want you to be very prepared when you go into that interview. So we're going to talk about the different various types. I'm also going to talk to you about how do you communicate your best image at the interview, and then how do you answer the key questions at the interview. And then we're going to teach you about what's called the STAR method. So when Art is sending up the follow-up email tomorrow, he's also going to include the STAR method handouts. I really recommend that you use that, and we're going to kind of break that down as we go along here. And then what do you do after the interview? What type of follow-up are you going to provide? So let's get right into this and talk about how do you prepare for the interview. So the first thing that I want you to do is please take a few minutes and Google the employer that you're going in to interview for. So in my previous job, I did a lot of interviewing, and it was for a very well-known nonprofit. And I would have people that I would interview, they would come in and say to me, "What do you do here?" I want you to be able to know what the job is, know something about the employer, and I always recommend that you take a look at their mission statement. I remember myself, I was at an interview one time and they said, "Why do you want to work here?" And I quoted back their mission statement, and the interviewer said to me, "Wow, I didn't even know that that was our mission statement." So please know a little bit about the company. When you're scheduling the interview, ask questions at the time that you're scheduling it. Who will be interviewing? How long do you think it will last? Please verify the location and the address of the place where the interview is going to be. I'll give you an example. Our career force here based out of Duluth, we used to be one block up the street. So I'll have a lot of people who they will set up an appointment with me, and this was before the pandemic, and they would say, "Oh, I know for sure where you're located." But then when not the interview, but the actual time when I was going to be meeting with them came, say it was 2 o'clock, they didn't show up till 2:30, and they're like, "Well, Gloria went to the old building." So what I always recommend is that you drive by the place the night before. You don't know for sure if they've moved, but you need to know where they're located. I encourage you to find out if they have an elevator, and make sure the elevator's working, okay? So if you have to go up 13 steps before the interview, you're going to be wore out before you even get there. And again, that is if they're interviewing in person. If they are interviewing online over the internet, I want you to make sure that your internet is working. Just kind of do some preview checking before you're actually ready to go for the interview, okay? When you are getting ready to go into the interview too, I want you to make sure that you review the job description again. Study it. Study the company's website. Look at their brochures. Learn everything you possibly can about the company before you go in. I love how we have it written here too, where it says, check your attitude, okay? So please make sure that if you have a chip on your shoulder from the previous company you were working with, that you get rid of that chip before you go into the interview. I was taught as an interviewer to pay attention to your attitude. Now, something else that I find really fascinating, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is true, is when I'm interviewing you or when you're at the interviewer is trying to figure out how are you going to fit in here. Now, how I know that too is I would go out and advocate with employers for my clients to help them get a job. And I asked every employer out there, What's the most important thing to you in an employee? Now, I would think that they would say, well, that they know how to do the job or that they had these specific skills. But I kid you not, every single employer said in one form or the other, the most important thing to me is that they're going to fit in here. So remember to keep your attitude in check, okay? You don't talk negative about your previous employer, even if something did happen. You don't talk negative about it. You do not bring it up at the interview. And the reason for that is that it's our human nature, and as the interviewer, for me to think, my goodness, if you don't work out here, are you going to go and say bad things about our company as well? And I haven't met a company that their reputation doesn't matter. Many of these companies have worked very hard to build up their reputation, and they certainly don't want anybody talking bad about it in the community. I love too how we have written on here, look good. Um, Before you go to the interview, please take a few minutes, go to the bathroom, look in the mirror, see how you look, make sure everything's, where it needs to be. I interviewed a gentleman one time and he had something blue on the front of his tooth. Now, I did not know him well enough to say, excuse me, sir, you have something blue on your tooth, but it distracted me during the whole interview. So just make sure everything is where it needs to be and that it's in the place that you intended it to be. Um, I want you also to be prepared to discuss your skill gaps. I just got done doing a mock interview with a gal who she ended up getting the job. But what ended up happening with her was that she was a stay-home mom. And I want to say that I think if I remember right, it was probably about 8 years that she stayed home with her children. Now she wanted to get back into the workforce. So the employer is looking at her resume saying, well, I see that you have some gaps in your career. Can you tell me a little more about that? So we role played this out over the telephone until she actually was comfortable in saying it. So know that that's a service that we will help you with, is we can do a mock interview. We have many questions that if you master those questions, you're going to master the interview. But what she became comfortable saying was, when you look at my resume, you're going to see that, yes, I do have a gap in my employment. There was a time in my life when I had the opportunity to stay at home with my children. That time has now changed, and I want to get back into the workforce, and that is why I am applying with you and excited to start working for you. Okay, so do you see how they addressed the gap? They didn't say, well, I don't know for sure why I have a gap, or the truth of the matter is when I was talking with that lady is that she had gone through a divorce. Well, you don't discuss that at the interview, okay? Instead, you want to keep it as positive as you possibly can. Employers are looking for people with positive work attitude, and oftentimes they will emphasize the attitude over the skills and training and experience. So I want you to remember that, look, I can teach you the skills, but I can't teach you how to be nice on the job. Okay. That's what you want to really impress upon me during the interview. Look for ways to show your enthusiasm and your willingness to learn. I always loved it when someone would say, I love to learn, okay, at the interview. If they did not necessarily know every part of the job, that's okay. I could teach them that. But if you tell me that you love to learn, right away, I'm very interested in hiring you because most of the people that I would interview would say, that's not the way we do it around here, or that's not the way that I was taught. I always say, what does it matter? You're getting paid to do the job a certain way. As long as it's not illegal, do it the way the employer wants you to do it, okay? Um, we also just want to talk real quickly about what you're going to wear to the interview. So first off, please make sure that you have, I call it the interview uniform, okay? We always say that if you are going to go in for the interview, you're dressed one step above what the agency or the job position is. So I'll give you an example. If you are going in for a landscaper interview, okay, of course you're not going to wear a shirt and tie because a landscaper doesn't wear that on the job. But what you don't want to go in is with your safety vest, your hard hat, safety glasses, okay? Landscaper typically wears jeans. What we say is you would dress one step above. So that would be, uh, uh, for a man, it would be a button-down shirt. We always recommend that you wear long sleeve. And then maybe some khaki pants or blue pants. but something that is not jeans, okay? And then make sure that you are taking a shower, you're clean, okay? Even your hands are clean. And then for a woman, same and similar, you just dress one step above. So if you were going in for landscaping, you too would want to wear an appropriate shirt, not where you've got a low cut shirt, and then also dress pants, but they aren't, you wouldn't wear a skirt to a landscaping interview, okay? So I hope that gives you a little bit of a better idea. Now, another thing that is really interesting is that I've talked to several people and they think in their mind that, okay, I'm going in for the interview, Glory. It's just going to be me and the interviewer. But the truth is that there are all different types of interviews. So if you can find out what type of interview it's going to be, great. But sometimes when they call you and are saying, we'd like you to come in for the interview, they don't necessarily give you that information. Okay, so the purpose of the interview is to get acquainted with you. It's for them to get to know you, and then also for you to be evaluating whether or not you even want the job, okay? So we have what's called a telephone interview. So that is a screening interview to eliminate candidates based on criteria such as objective, education, required skills. The important part is that you want to be organized and prepared for them to happen unexpectedly, okay? So we also have on here that if you do need to reschedule, let the interview know beforehand. But I'll tell you what, I recommend that you do not reschedule your interview. If you have set it up, boy, try everything possible to get there. Just by having to reschedule kind of puts a negative towards it. So again, I would be very careful if you do. And again, call us at the Career Force and we can give you some different ideas. Another interview, of course, is the in-person screening. And that is a screening where we too will eliminate candidates based on criteria such as objectives, your education, your skills. Oftentimes an in-person screening is through the human resources department. So you're not even actually interviewing yet with the person who's going to be working with you, but instead it's going to be human resources, and then human resources decide if you can go on to the next step, and that would be a second interview. The goal is to select the best candidate that will meet with the decision maker, okay? Another way of interviewing is the selection interview, and this could be multiple interviews. So it's always important too to remember that you might be interviewing more than once. Just because you go to the first one and master it doesn't mean they aren't going to call you back again. Art, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for a good place to break in. We do have a couple of questions to get to, and I will break in every once in a while by turning my video on, and then Glory will
Yes.
come to me with the questions. Like to handle two of them. One was about the dress. So if you go to interviews and you were way overdressed, how do you recover that? And then maybe before that, how would you prepare not to do that?
Excellent question. So first off, I recommend that you get a hold of us because we know a lot of the employers in your area and what would be the best dress. If you are way overdressed, shake it off. Okay, still go into the interview. At that time and point, you're not going to be able to do anything to change it. Although you could go into the bathroom and let's say that I had on this work jacket and I felt like I was overdressed. I could always just take the jacket off, provided I had an appropriate shirt on underneath. So maybe you could do something on that order. Let's say you can't. Let's say that you've got on something that you can't adjust, you can't do anything to change it. Then you go in there and you work it the best you can. Okay. I'll tell you what, when I was interviewing, I was more concerned about your attitude and if you're going to fit in over your dress. Okay. So you want to make it the best appearance and example of who you are. I can get over what you're wearing, provided that it's not something inappropriate.
So, and by the way, it's always okay to dress a little bit. You should always dress a little bit better than the job requires. This is kind of you on your best day in that job.
Yes.
But yeah, that occasionally happens. And, looking at the company website, networking, finding out what, the appropriate dress is. We do get this question a lot in regards to video interviewing, where you will be dressed up and everyone else will be in hoodies and all sorts of working from home. I still say dress for the job as it would exist in that office. So you may find yourself way overdressed in a video interview, but it's just because we're in a really weird dynamic now, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. A couple of questions about how do you handle talking about your previous employer without creating a negative image of that company? So how can you explain like why you left or you know what happened there when something bad happened, but you don't want to create that negativity?
Excellent question. So first off, you never ever want to say anything negative. So let's say that you did have problems with your previous employer, you don't bring it up. I would say if they say, why did you leave your last job? I would say, you know, I am really looking at advancing in my career. Okay. But make sure that you keep it positive, even if it was a horrible situation that you ended up leaving. So let's say that you were fired. Okay. And you feel wronged and you're very upset about it. Well, rightly so. I understand that. But the important part is that you don't say anything about that at the interview. Okay. Instead, what you want to say is that I was involuntarily separated, okay, from my previous company. But since then, I am just so delighted to come to work for you guys. I have researched your company. I know that you make a good product and I want to be a part of your team. Okay. So keep it positive. Um, and, you know, like the earlier screen had said, get that chip off your shoulder. Make sure that you have it off of your shoulder. Otherwise, it's going to come across at the interview. I was trained and taught how to interview. In addition to that, I was trained and taught to be reading what you're saying, reading between the lines, as they call it, checking your body language, which we're going to get into, and just really trying to figure out, are you going to be a good fit here? Okay. So, and then also, are you going to say negative things about our company if it doesn't work out here for you? You know, we as employers understand that things change. Ideally, we would like to hire you and have you work for us forever, but it doesn't always work that way. So you just want to make the best of it and stay out of the negativity. I want to just touch base here with the behavioral interview. So the behavioral interview is actually providing more information about you on the job and your behavior on the job. So that could be in regards to your personality, your characters. The questions will require you to describe how you handled work-related situations. And then we're also going to talk about the STAR technique, which I'm going to get into that, but it's going to help you to prepare for the interview. And that will also be another part of the handouts that come in your email tomorrow. And then the last one we have here is a group or peer group interview. So this is the opportunity to meet and talk with other coworkers. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this one. So let's say that I have two people that are my employees, okay, and you don't know that I've made a good deal or I made a deal with them that would you please take this potential person that I'm really thinking of hiring around and give them a tour of the factory. Now, when my peer group, those two guys are going to do that, and what they're going to do is they're going to come back and report to me how you were with them. But just please be aware of that, okay? So what they're going to tell me is how they thought you would fit in. So now if you're walking around with these two people as they're giving you a tour and you're saying bad stuff about me, like, I don't know if I like her or not, that gets reported back to me and you could actually lose the job offer just by that. So remember that that is part of the group. Part of the interview. So just because they're giving you a tour of the factory, for instance, doesn't mean the interview's over. It means that the company is actually very interested in you, but those people are going to be reporting back to me, more than likely, okay? When you are at the interview too, it is super important for you to communicate your best image, okay? So you want to send out good signals. I don't know if you guys have ever worked with somebody who maybe has a poor attitude, but that poor attitude can actually filter through the whole office and we can feel it. Okay, they can actually change the atmosphere of the room. So make sure that you are coming to the interview with your best image. So get everything organized early. I also want to let you know that there are different agencies in your area and our area who will help you with interview clothes. So please don't wait until the day of the interview to figure out what you're going to wear. Okay. Some of these agencies, they will give you a voucher and you can go in and get free interview I call it the interview uniform, but make sure that you're not waiting until the day of the interview to figure out what you're going to wear. Have copies of everything. Now, it's important for you to get a portfolio ready when you're going into the interview. Now, the first time I heard the word portfolio, I'm like, good Lord, what is that? I mean, now you're telling me I have to have this too? Portfolio is just a fancy word for a folder, okay? But inside that folder, I want you to have, I always say, at least 5 copies of your resume. Now, I know it's easy to think, why would I need 5 copies of my resume? They already have it. But I actually had this happen where I went to an interview, the computer system had gone down. They came out and told me, Glory, we don't think we're going to be able to interview you today because our computer system went down and we didn't even print your resume off before it went down. So I said, well, you know what? I just so happen to have copies of my resume here. Can we still go through with the interview? And you know what? I ended up getting the job because of that. Okay. So also you would have your letter of recommendations in there. I also, if you have any certificates, you're going to make copies of those certificates if they apply to the job. Okay. And then during the interview, towards the end, if they ask you for the certificates, great. If they don't, that's a great time just to take them out and leave them on the table and say, oh, and by the way, here is my certificate for ABC. I'll just leave this with you. So it's just a copy of it, but guaranteed after you leave the interview, they might not look at it at all during the interview, but they will afterwards. Okay. Plan to arrive 10 to 15 minutes before the interview. I always say that if you're going to show up a half hour early, that's creepy. Okay, that's too early. But I want you to show up 15 minutes would be the ideal, or 10 minutes early for the interview. Now, here's the deal. When you walk into that interview, typically, this isn't always, but typically they will have somebody who is sitting at the desk and they're going to notify somebody that you're here for the interview. That person, whether it be the receptionist, whether it be someone who is the greeter, I call it the first point of contact. It's the first person that you're going to see. I want you to be nice to that person. Please have a little story to visit, just a little chit-chatting, like you could talk about the weather, you could talk about the Vikings, okay? But the key is that you want to have something that you can make a little bit of a connection with. Because here's what happens. Typically, the interviewer will go out and touch base with that person, and you don't know this, okay? And it's not a guaranteed, but I just always say that just plan on the fact that I'm going to come out, I'm going to talk to the point of contact, and I'm going to say, what did you think of that person? How were they when they were just sitting there? Were they playing on their phone? Okay. Were they texting? Were they talking on the phone? I actually had a person who answered the phone, and he had done a very, very good interview. I was actually going to hire him, but I went out and asked Miss Jackie, who I held near and dear to my heart, because she knew the job and she knew what she was doing. And I said, Miss Jackie, what did you think? And he said, well, you know what? He was talking on the phone. Not only that, I think he was talking to his girlfriend and he was swearing at her. Well, now, I was going to hire the person up until that happened. So remember that that is a real thing that we do check in with everybody, because again, we're trying to figure out if you're going to fit in here, okay? Send good signals. So when I first was taught this in psychology, it used to be 50% of all communication is nonverbal. That has changed. Okay, it has changed to 80%, and I've even heard some professionals say 85% of all communication is nonverbal. So that means it's your body language, it's your facial expression. Especially now if you're doing interviews through Zoom or WebEx or online, make sure that you're practicing good eye contact, that you're still looking at the camera, okay? If your camera's over here, it gives a deceiving, even though you don't mean it to be, you're looking at the screen over here when actually you need to be looking directly at the camera, okay? I have, it's written here, greet the interviewer with a firm handshake. I always used to have my clients practice their handshake, but you know, nowadays we can't even do a handshake. So I think that sometimes we have to overcompensate a little bit by practicing other ways of doing interviews. And this is one of them where we will practice with you if you have to do an online interview. Sometimes it's gotten to a point where you actually do an interview on your cell phone now. So again, we will help you do those types of interviews so that you're going to be really comfortable with what you're doing, okay? Also, when you are at the interview, I want you to really focus on the question. What are they actually asking you? Okay. And make sure that you answer the question. It is okay if you say to them, did I answer that question? Okay, that is okay to say. Just make sure that you back up your statements with samples of your productivity. Okay, use real life stories of examples that happen in your experience. Emphasize your commitment to learning. And then finish strong. So wrap up by summarizing any strengths or qualities that you want them to remember. Okay, never leave an interview without asking a good question. And I always say that if you have gotten your questions answered throughout the interview, because I want you to be asking questions through the interview too, I always say that you at least want to ask when they say to you, do you have any questions for us, Glory? I want you to say, when are you looking to fill the position? Okay. Or if you feel even more confident, you can say, when can I start? Okay. But the key is you want to find that out, because if it's 3 months from now, you're going to starve to death by then if you're relying on this job. Okay. So that's at least one of the good questions that you can ask. Now, another thing we were talking earlier about Art, I'm going to let you ask the question before I get into the star.
I try to get on in that perfect time, but there's a little bit of lag getting my camera up. So we got a couple of questions, and this
Yes.
this may seem kind of funny, but this has happened to me.
Okay.
Would an elbow bump be a good icebreaker? And the reason I want to preface this is I've been in several situations in which it was a little awkward, where someone was kind of give me one of these, and one of them was the commissioner for deed.
Yes.
And it's just, some people are going to be comfortable with that. Some people it's not going to be the right. I would always take that direction from that employer. If they're looking from that. In fact, I've even seen it on video where they'll say virtual elbow bump. It gets kind of silly, but it's one of those social niceties that we're missing right now, and people still feel there needs to be that. So here's a couple of questions. I think these are in relation to portfolios, and if you include certifications, diplomas, that sort of thing, could that potentially show your age?
Ooh, really good question. Well, first off, I have a diploma, but I don't make a copy of it. I used to think that they wanted a copy of that. They don't necessarily want a copy of it. I'm looking here. I don't think my diploma has a date on it. No. Could it potentially show your age? Yeah, if it has a date on it, absolutely. But okay, so say that you have a welding certificate and it's from 1995. I wouldn't bring that in. Okay, because clearly they're going to probably have you get recertified. I have guys who they have OSHA certificates. I don't know if you know this or not, but every new place that you go to work for, you have to get recertified for OSHA. Now, if you have like a CPR, for instance, that's you have to get recertified every 3 years. So that's not going to show your age. You want to be careful so that you're not giving too much information, but also now I also want you to realize that if you are at the interview, they're going to figure out that either you might be a little older, you might be younger, but now you're a real live person. So I can't just throw you away like a piece of paper, like your resume. And that is why it's going to be important at the interview that you're going to convince me you're the best person for the job. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Art?
No, it's just something that always look at documents and does this net help me or net hurt me? And
Yes.
in most cases, anything that's fairly current is going to be a net help. If it's a requirement,
yes.
I have to say that I've always been impressed when someone takes the extra effort and organizational thought to give me what I'm going to need if I hire them. So if it's a requirement, including it, I think is a good thing. But certainly looking at the dates, I understand that. So a couple more questions and then we'll move on. If the interviewer is running late, how long do you wait for the interview to happen?
Forever. I mean, it's totally different if the interview is running late. You just sit there and be as pleasant as you can be, and certainly don't say anything like, my goodness, the interview is running late. I got something better to do besides this. No, you don't. Okay. Be nice while you're waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that, make sure you don't have anything scheduled for as long after that interview as possible. Don't try to closely schedule things. I've had people come into interviews telling me, you know, when are we going to be done? Because I'm on a pretty tight schedule. That tells me this wasn't important to you.
Right.
If you're working in a job right now and you're looking to another job, if at all possible, try to take the afternoon off. I know that's not always possible, but it tells the employer this is really important to me.
Yes.
The other thing is online, it's a little different. If you're getting online and it's just nothing's happening and you're not seeing people, I would hopefully you would have an email contact so then you can reach out to that employer to see if you're on the right meeting or if something happened technology wise. Don't give up on them. Don't think they're rude. It could be just a miscommunication, but wait as long as possible and contact and follow through. Don't assume the worst. We'll take one more question and then we'll move on.
Yes.
Is it okay to ask about salary or benefits at the interview?
Absolutely not. Okay, that is not the time to be discussing salary or benefits. What I want you to do is to do your research ahead of time, so that way you're going to know if you should even be applying for this job. Okay, we have different resources when you go on our careerforceminnesota.com. Art, maybe you want to put that in the chat. Where we have like a one stop, which will give you an idea of a salary range for different companies. You can put in the zip code and the name of the company, and it'll give you a little better idea. So then you can make a good choice on whether or not you're going to apply for this company. And again, if they're not paying enough money, maybe you don't want to apply for them. Also, if you get a hold of the career force again, we can give you a better idea because we know what a lot of these companies' pay ranges are. So then you can make a better decision. Okay, so I want to get into talking a little bit about the STAR, and this is actually the sandwich method. So if you'll see underneath there, it says positive, negative, and positive. So I'm going to give you exactly break this down for you so you know what in the world I'm talking about. Okay, so let's say that they have asked you a question. The first thing I want you to do is give direct, honest answers. Okay, you can ask the question back in return, but I want you to be prepared. So anticipate the question and practice beforehand. So what we always encourage you to do is to role play out some of these questions. So let me give you an example. Typically, when you're at an interview, they'll thank you for coming in, or they'll thank you for joining them online, and they'll say, "So, Glory, tell me a little bit about yourself." Okay. Now, here's what you say as human being if you don't know any better. Okay, but today you're going to learn, and you're going to know better. But as we as human beings, we say, "Oh, well, I was born in so and so, and I have this many children. I've been married for this long." Well, what in the world does that have to do with the job? Okay. So what I always say is give yourself permission to say 3 skills. Okay. Um, thank them for interviewing you. I always say, well, I first want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview with you. And I want to let you know that I am dependable, I am trustworthy, and I'm a woman of my word. Just say 3 things, okay? And that's okay. Then be quiet and give them the opportunity to ask the next question. I've had it where people will say, I'll say, tell me a little bit about yourself, and 45 minutes later, they're finally done talking and pause. They didn't give me a chance to even ask another question, okay? You want to make sure for the sandwich model that you use a positive statement followed by a negative situation and ending with a positive statement and how you overcome the problem or the solution. Now, let me give you an example. So one of the questions that they will ask you is, Glory, so tell me about what is a weakness that you have. Okay, please don't say you don't have any. Okay, we all have weaknesses, but you need to be aware of it and you need to say something. Okay, and this is true about me now. So Art is an expert at this and I don't really care for it. Okay, so when I was asked, Glory, tell us about a weakness. One of my weaknesses is Excel. Kind of get a glaze over my face when I'm doing it, okay? Spreadsheets, they're not my favorite thing to do. But what I'm willing to do, Mr. Employer, is I'll take a refresher class before my first day of employment. Okay, so do you see how Excel is actually a positive, wonderful piece and can help you an awful lot. And we have to do Excel spreadsheets in almost every type of job that you're doing nowadays. But wasn't my favorite thing, but I'll take a refresher course and make sure that I am ready to do it, okay? The key is you want to focus on your best skills and the skills that the employer is looking for. So now let me give you another example. I had a gentleman who he was a heck of a good forklift driver. I'm telling you, he could drive forklift. He could do everything with that forklift. It was very impressive. But we didn't own a forklift. Okay. So when he was at the interview and talking about how good he could drive a forklift, I was kind of scratching my head like, why are you even telling me this? And the reason that he was telling me that was because he thought that that's what he would be doing. So that tells me he didn't read the job description. And then in addition to that, I was thinking to myself, okay, so if I hire you and a forklift job comes along, you're probably going to go work for that forklift job instead, because I'm assuming that they probably pay better than I do. Now, who's to say he probably got sick of driving a forklift, okay? But his examples of his skills were not lining up with the job description and what I was looking for, okay? And the employer does come to his own assumptions, and you're not going to know what those assumptions are. So you want to make sure you're staying within the job that you're interviewing for, okay? Um, so the STAR example, and I love this one, if you can actually get this embedded in your brain, because when you go to the interview, sometimes you get really nervous. It's hard to remember your name, let alone answer some of these questions. But I like this acronym because it can help you to resort back to, okay, yes. So the STAR is, I'm going to talk about a situation, and I'm going to talk about what the task was. I'm going to talk about the action, what I did, and what was the result of it. So, situation. Provide an example of a situation you were involved in that had a positive outcome. Task. Describe the different tasks that are involved in that situation and choose the tasks that show your skills, okay? The action means that you're going to explain what actions did you actually take in that situation, and then the results are just that, to describe the positive results that came from your actions. Okay, so now let me give you a better example. So let's say that your job is to be answering telephones, okay? So the situation is that we had 10 lines coming into our receptionist desk. And so at times it would end up getting a little bit difficult because everybody would call all at the same time. So I learned very quickly that what I needed to do was to answer the phone, recognize them, and say, I'll be right back with you, place them on hold. And as a result, we ended up getting 10% more in sales because of the way that I treated them when they first called. Okay, so do you see how you're going to actually give them a real life example of what you did to improve things? Okay. Here's the tell me about yourself question. I want to remind you, and I don't know, you probably already know this, but I want to remind you that I legally can't ask you how old you are. I can't ask you your marital status. I can't ask you your sexual preference. I can't ask you your religious beliefs. But when I ask you, tell me about yourself, if you tell me all those things, it's no longer illegal. Okay. So please keep it job related. When I'm saying tell me about yourself, stay within the job. Now, I've had people say to me, well, okay, so how do you know that they aren't going to look at it? If I tell them I have 3 kids at home, that they're not going to look at it like I'm grounded, I'm rooted, I'm not going anywhere, I got these mouths to feed, I'm going to be working for you forever. I always say, doesn't that sound just wonderful? I mean, I think that's just, it makes your heart melt, doesn't it? But how do you know that they're going to be thinking, great, you got kids? Now your old lady's going to be calling here every day. You're going to be calling in sick because your daycare is going to blow up on you, and you're going to go home. The deal is you don't know. So that's the most important part, is that stay within the job and keep the children and the family out of the interview, okay? You want to talk about yourself because you're the one who's going to be working the job, and you're the one that I would be hiring. Why are you interested in working for this company? Boy, I've had people say to me, what do you guys do here? So please have an answer, and a positive one, about why you are actually interested in working for this company. Don't say because I need a job, okay? Or because I need the money. We all work for money, okay? That's basically the reason that we're working. But get into the company itself. I know that you guys make a really good product here, and I want to be a part of that, okay? I know that you have a great team, and I want to be a part of that. Okay. What is your major weakness? Remember to have a weakness. What is one of your strengths? Okay. If you don't recognize what your skills are, you're not going to be able to talk to me about it at the interview. So you can always ask your friends if you're like, I don't know for sure what my strengths are. Ask your friends. They know what your strengths are. You're a good communicator. You're trustworthy. Okay. You give me good advice. You tell me, how to handle different situations. You can say that then at the interview. Okay. Give an example of how you solved a problem. Another one here is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Or they'll say, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Or what are your long-term career goals? Your answer is, I see myself working for you, and hopefully I will have gotten a promotion. Okay. I interviewed a gal one time and she said, well, I see myself opening up my own retail store and in 3 to 5 years, and hopefully I'll be the business owner. Well, no, I didn't hire her because I was interviewing her for a retail position. Okay. I'm not going to bring you in, teach you the arts and the skills of the industry so you can go down the street and compete with me. Now, the deal is where do any of us know where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years? No, we're only guaranteed today. But at the interview, you are going to give Mr. Employer the impression that you're going to be with them forever, because they're going to put all this time and effort into training you up. They want you to stay with them forever because that's how they're going to make the most money. Okay. And that's also how you're going to make the most money. So you're going to give them impression that you're going to be with them forever. Art, did you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. One attendee is not having sound. I would imagine, since I haven't heard that from anyone else, that there aren't sound issues for the rest of the participants. If you're having sound issues, you're probably not hearing me, but if you're hearing me okay, please just someone put into the chat that the sound is okay. Did have a question, and I'm on a different system than Glory. That's why I'm pretty confident our sound is good. So I have another question. Dates on your resume. We put dates on our resume for our work history, and that's going to reflect our age. Could you comment on how to work with that?
Excellent question. First off, you are only going to go back 10 years on your resume. Okay. And then I also want to encourage you to join our class where it talks about employment over 50. Is that the title of it, Art? Is it the workshop? You're on mute.
It's job search over 50, I believe. Yes.
Yes, job search over 50. Now, let's say that you have worked for a company for 30 years. Okay. And I've had guys who have gotten kind of upset with me. They're like, Lori, I worked 30 years for a construction company. That's a long time. I put in my time. You're telling me I can't put that on my resume. Yeah, straight up. That's what I'm telling you. So if you've worked for a company for a long time, I want you to put on your resume 10 plus years. Now, clearly, once I interview you, I realize that you might be a little bit older, okay? But you want to be able to get into the interview. When you are interviewing, you want to impress upon the employer that you are the best person for the job, but you have to believe that yourself as well. You want to make sure that your resume is not dating you. Okay. Now, here's the thing. They won't come out to you and tell you, well, we're not going to hire you because we think you're too old or because we think you're too young. That's illegal. But what they will say to you is they'll say stuff to you like, well, we think that you're underqualified or you're overqualified. So please connect with us at the Career Force with the job counselors, because we can help you more with that. You can take a look at your resume. We can also talk to you more about what do you say at the interview? And you don't want to be underqualified and you don't want to be overqualified either. Remember, the employer is thinking to himself that I want to know if you're going to stay, if you're going to fit in, and if you're going to stay here. Those are the two things I want to know. If you're getting close to retirement age, I want you to give me the impression that you're not planning on retiring right away. I've had people who were older and they'll say, well, I'm only going to work for another couple of years and I'm out of here. Well, I'm not going to hire you then. I'm going to hire someone else who's going to stay with me for a long time. But I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you stuff like you're either overqualified or underqualified. So do you see how that kind of works into, be careful about how the impression that you're giving me and the employer, what motivates them the most is, one, they got to make money to stay in business. And then two, they want to hire you, train you, and have you working for them forever. Okay. I saw something about, wouldn't that be false information? Absolutely not. Um, the deal is that you want to be able to get in and get the interview, and 10 plus years leaves this almost like a leeway. Okay.
I'm
So
going to add to that just real quick.
yes,
Lori.
yes.
And I totally get there are reasons where you have to put the dates, and there's, you know, the format of the resume or the application. But if you have worked for a company for 30 years, 40 years, let's say, and there are some people who work for my company for 50 years, I guarantee in that 50 years they've had different jobs. They haven't had the
Mhm.
same job, or the job has changed titles, or the organization has changed titles. We want to be honest. I totally get that. But in the last 4 years, Glory's job has changed titles. Mine has changed 3 times. I have the same company, so I can show the longevity if I want to. I have that flexibility, or I can show it as far back as I want to. Now, if you have a very complicated situation, great situation in which you reach out to the career force, explain your specific situation,
Yes.
how best to handle it. These are not one size fits all. I understand that. I'm going to put something into the chat box. It's just a great resource for working through those star stories. It's more from an employer perspective, but it really paints a great picture of why you should invest in creating those great star stories. We only have about 10 minutes left. Gloria will get through the rest of the presentation, and then we'll hit as many questions as we can.
Yes. Another thing that's really important, people get hung up on this too, where they're like, okay, so I want to have 5 references. What I recommend is that you have 3 good references. 3 references are plenty. I also want to remind you that, you know, no, please don't misunderstand me. You want to always think that the employer is going to check your references, okay? But what I found was that if you interviewed with me really well and you sold yourself to me and convinced me you were the best person for the job, I didn't necessarily have to check your references and find out how great you were. I believe you, okay? I want you to come to work, but please keep your references informed. So here's what I recommend that you do. Get permission from them for starters. Second off, don't use your mom as a reference. Okay, I've called your mom before and she can't maintain. She'll say stuff to me like, well, you know, Billy's a good boy, but if you could just give him a job, then he can move out on his own. Okay, don't use that. Let's say that you were fired. So you don't necessarily want to use your boss as a reference, but who you can use is someone who has been a work colleague, okay? Someone who can give you a good reference about how you are as a worker. Um, I also want you to give a copy of the job description to your reference. So I've done this in the past. I'm like, oh, here's the job that I applied for, and here's my resume for that job. And then my reference will look at it and like, wow, Gloria, I didn't even know you could do all these things. Okay. If you barely know what your skills are, your references don't necessarily know all your skills either. Okay. Um, and then at the very end of the interview, it is so important for you to send a thank you. Now, I want you to be prepared for this ahead of time. So, and you can do this however you feel more comfortable. So, what I've learned is that if you are interviewing online, they contacted you online through email, for instance, then you can send your thank you letter or note back to them through email. But what my personal preference was I would go to the dollar store and I would buy a thank you card. And for me, it would be a big card that says thank you on the front. You open it up and on the inside it was blank. Now, again, this is your own personal preference. But what I would do on the left side is I would have my email and my phone number there. And on the right side, I would say thank you for the opportunity to interview with you. I look forward to hearing from you. And sincerely, Glory Mitchell. Now, because I had my email and my phone number right there, I thought, that way they don't have to look it up. They can just call me right away and tell me that I got the job. In that thank you note too, if they have introduced themselves to you by using their first name, if you're nervous and you really want that job, it's hard to remember their first name, okay? So one of the ways that you can do that is ask them for their business cards if you are, there in person. But I also want to point out that if they introduce themselves to you as Mrs. Mitchell, then that's how you refer to them in the thank you card. If you can't remember any of their names, don't get hung up on that. Just make sure that you say thank you for the opportunity to interview with you. I look forward to speaking with you soon. I have also had where a thank you card will be the determining factor. So let's say that I'm trying to figure out between two different people which to hire. Sometimes just because I got that thank you card, that actually is I'm going to hire you because you took the time to say thank you. It's also super important that you send that thank you card within 24 hours. You want to be clear. Please make sure that your handwriting is legible. Okay. And it also shows that you're professional, that you're really interested in the company, that it conveys your desire to that you're going to continue to communicate with us, and it keeps your name in their mind for the next opening. Okay, so I want you to know too that it's really important if I call you back and tell you I'm sorry that you didn't get the job, but we'll keep your resume. Please don't say something like, well, fine, I didn't want the job anyways. I want you to say, thank you so much for the opportunity, and please keep my resume handy because I really want to work for your company. So if another position comes up, feel free to get a hold of me. Don't burn your bridges, okay? Art, do we have any more questions?
Yes. Wait till my yes.
Yes.
The number of questions I've been trying to get to as many as we can while you were talking there, so we can make use of our time here.
Yes.
So some questions about how often do you follow up after an interview? At what point does it become a to keep contacting the company?
Okay, so a follow-up and a thank you note are two different things. So you've got 24 hours to give the thank you note. I always say call them back in 3 to 5 business days, but you're only going to call once. Okay. Also, what you want to do at the interview is you want to ask them, are you going to let us know when you have filled the position? Unfortunately, especially in this area, we have a lot of employers that don't let you know. So we've been trying to work with them on, please at least let the people that you've interviewed know whether they got the job or not. But I just recommend that you just call back once and that you talk to either human resources or the person that interviewed you. Hopefully they're going to give you contact information, meaning that when they contacted you for the interview, I would go back to that person. Okay.
And by the way, until you hear no, it's okay to reach out again. It took me 3 months once to get a job offer because there was a hiring freeze. And never assume that they're dragging you on. Always contact them positively.
Yes.
As soon as you let your frustration, which you very well may be feeling, enter your tone, it could be over because no one wants to have that from a potential employee.
Boy, the state of Minnesota is probably one of the worst at letting you know I mean, it takes a long time to get different positions. Another thing that we had just touched base on was for adding your dates. If you are applying for a position through the state of Minnesota, please get a hold of us too, because Art and I have some inside information about making sure that your resume has the right dates on it. So I can give you more information on that too. We do have a lot of jobs that are available right now, so I encourage you to take a look at that.
When is an okay time to potentially talk about a conviction, a criminal background in an interview?
Excellent question. So now, first off, not everybody can go and do a background check on you, and it's not a valid background check. Yes, they can Google you, I understand that. But in order for a person to do a valid background check on you, you have to give them permission in writing. So what they'll do is you'll be at the interview and they'll say, okay, Glory, we need to do a background check on you. And they'll hand you a piece of paper across the table and they'll say, would you sign here and let us do a background check on you? That's when you say, I was wondering when I should bring this up, but this is a perfect time. So yes, where do I sign for you to do a background check? Sign. And then I want you to say something on like this. When you look at my background, you're going to see some things that I'm not very proud of. So several years ago, I ended up having some troubles, but since then I have learned that that is not the person that I used to be, and you get back into something positive. Would you also put on in the chat, Art, about New Leaf? I want to encourage you to attend our New Leaf workshop, which describes and gives you information specifically on justice-involved individuals. Okay, so people who do have a background, and we really break that down on what do you say at the interview.
There's one coming up tomorrow, by the way. There's a new leaf that happens once a month, and the next one's tomorrow. I put the link into the chat. We do have time for one more question. Yeah. Okay. Since many people are not working in an office now, how do you send thank yous? Do you send them by emails? Do you send them snail mail? How do you do that?
Well, I don't recommend you do snail mail anymore. My goodness, I've sent something from Cloquet to Duluth and it took 2 weeks. So, but what you want to do is you want to send the thank you through the resource that they notified you of the job. Okay. So for instance, let's just say they text you and had you come in for the interview, text them back with the thank you after the interview. If they emailed you, then you can email them back. Okay. But you use the same format as how they notified you to come in for the interview.
Perfect. With that, we will be saving the chat, Gloria and I, and we'll reach out to those questions that did not get answered during the course of today. Again, this was recorded. We will put it up on YouTube overnight, and tomorrow at some point before the end of the day, you will receive that follow-up information. I'll turn it over to Glory to close it out for us today. Thanks for coming.
Yes, we are so delighted that you could join us today. And like Art said, we go through the chat, so you will get answers to your questions. And we're just excited that you are getting close to the interview. Please reach out to us if you have any more questions or if you need some mock interviewing. We're here to help. We can take a look at your resume. Anything that you need, we're here to help, and let us know. All right, bless you and have a great afternoon.